All right. Hello, Fortinos, brothers and sisters. Welcome back to Ministry Revealed. It is May 8th, 2025. And just as I was watching on the news, looks like we got a new pope, and one of those old prophecies, I guess, gets put to rest. Well, with that, we are going to get into something that I don't think we've ever gotten into before. We've touched about it here and there, and we show it in the is to come. But what we're going to get into today is is going to twist, I think, many of your minds as it has mine in the past. When it came to the story of the crucifixion, when it happened, how the Gospels talk about it, all four Gospels, it's confusing. And for many, they've believed that it's either John in his Gospel or the Synoptic Gospels. And in the past, as you guys know, I've spent most of our teachings talking about the was and the is and how they relate to revealing prophecy for the is to come. We've done that for almost exclusively for about 7.5 years. And of course, if anybody's new, the was is from creation to Christ, the is from Christ until the moment of the pre trib, and the is to come is from the pre trib until the end. Well, that's not what we're going to do today. Today, we are going to spend some time in the is of what happened at the crucifixion. And though I don't have all of the answers, I think what you're going to see here tonight is really going to have you saying, oh my goodness, because you're going to witness for yourself things that we've been taught in church for centuries. And though there are some that know parts and pieces, I've seen it as I was studying. It's been a long couple of days, and I'm tired, and I need to go to bed as early as I can tonight and uh, take naps tomorrow. But I'm going to get this done because it's pretty awesome. I have come to understand the story of the Passover now in relation to what the Gospels tell us better than I ever have in the past. And I could owe this in part to our brother Jake. He's been really spending some time and digging into it. And, I was looking at some of the things he had said, and, I wasn't fully in line, and we weren't fully in agreement. We had a chat last night, a Zoom, and, we left with something to consider. And it wasn't until this afternoon that consideration really started to jump out at me like big time. And when you see it, everything you thought you understood about the Passover, I think is about to change in relation to what you've been told of when these things took place. All right? It's going to be a mind bender. So get those Berean hats on. Make sure to pay attention, pause and rewind when you need to. Go into the scriptures for yourself and study them. And you'll see, because for me, what happened is when Jake had been emailing me for the last couple of weeks, I would consider some things, I would look at some things, and then I responded to him about 3 or 4 days ago. And when I did, it was late at night, and I said I was going to look into it. And I thought, well, what better time? I have some time right now. So I looked into it, and right off the bat, something caught my attention that I had never seen before. And with these past 2 to 3 years, when we first caught this word, it made a massive difference. And then when we caught this word in the last several months, it made another massive difference. And we're going to start with that when we get going here. And that was the same word that I saw in relation to the Passover. And as I went through it deeper and deeper, I realized there was no way. So with that, brothers and sisters, we're going to get going. We're going to go through this. We're going to play this out, and we're going to put out a couple of scenarios. One scenario, it becomes extremely clear that it was not possible. all right, it becomes extremely clear that it was not possible. And the other one doesn't appear to have enough evidence, though the scriptures themselves are the evidence, because gaps in between events happening, which sometimes could be weeks, sometimes they could be days, sometimes they could be months, or even a couple of years or so, happens all the time in scripture, jumping just through a few verses. And that is the evidence to me for the second scenario. You're going to see when we get there. That'll go on a little bit later. But as we get started, I'm going to do now, as I always do. If you're new to Ministry Revealed, you can definitely watch this. You don't need to have all of this revelation of prophecy that got us here. You're completely fine to watch it and grow in the understanding that we're going to share tonight, and see how the Spirit led this again from that one word that began to open it up for me, and follow along. But what I always recommend, if you're going to go from this teaching tonight and then want to go watch other things, I always recommend you first come to this playlist or link right here. You can either go to ministryrevealed.com right here, and from the menu click the intro and watch the first 4 teachings there. It's got a one-click download, so if you want to download it to device and watch it at any time, you can do that. From YouTube, you come to this playlist, and you click on this intro series right here. This intro series is this right here. There's 15 teachings in it, but that's not what I'm recommending. It's just the first 4. This first one here, Intro to the Gospels, is called Intro to the End Times Revelation. This is a 22-minute intro to what the next 3 are going to go into. So it just lightly gets you going into it, so that you're not just like, what? And then when you get to the second one is about who the Gospels are speaking to. It's a 30-minute Bible study that you can follow along with and go to the scriptures yourself and track and see. If you've ever questioned reading the scriptures and seeing that, especially within the Synoptic Gospels, the differences that happen in relation to the same stories that don't line up, and we've all been told that it's just perspective, and sure, within the Gospels themselves there's a perspective, but what they really are is prophecy. And we have proven that here dozens and dozens and dozens of places all throughout the Gospels, that the differences within the Gospels reveal prophecy. And that's what this 30-minute intro is going to begin to give you insight into. One great example I often use is if you go to the time of the crucifixion, when Jesus is arrayed in a robe before the cross. Most people, because they always read from Matthew and they don't pay as much attention to Mark or Luke because they think it's all just the same thing, they think he was just arrayed in a scarlet robe, right? Yet, if you go to Luke, it says that he was arrayed in a gorgeous robe. The gorgeous word in the Strong's is white, radiant, beautiful, gorgeous, okay? It's like a bride. If you go to Mark, he was arrayed in purple. And if you go to Matthew, he was arrayed in scarlet. It just so happens that if you go to the book of Revelation, the woman riding the beast is arrayed in purple and scarlet. So what are the chances that there's a relation within Mark and Matthew's time being to tribulation? Well, not only is it very good, it's absolutely going to be the case. So what does that mean? You're going to see that Luke is the pre-trib bride of Christ. Mark is speaking to the world of Gentiles that are grafted in with the house of Israel. And then Matthew is to Judah, the house of Judah. And what it reveals is pre, mid, and post are all true. It will blow your mind. This is just a soft 30-minute intro into that. The next teaching is what we call the revelation of the 14 years. What you're going to find out is once you understand the differences of who the Gospels are speaking to for the prophetic, you're going to realize that the end of days is not 7 years, but 14 years in a small period of time, which is 50 days, called above. In Luke, it represents the above. The pre-trib goes first. There's events for 50 days. Then you have 7 years of seals, and 7 years of trumpets. Why does the world only see 7 years? Well, I'll explain that in a moment as well, briefly. So this is just a 30-minute intro, lightly leading you to show you where these things are revealed. But we've got 3-hour teachings on each of these, more than one of them. So we have proven this out, and we can do it all the way back to the story from the beginning of the creations. Okay? But now, if this is true, how was it all missed? Number one, it wasn't yet time to make it known. Okay? Number two, it's all because of Matthew. This final fourth teaching for this intro series, I always recommend, is this one here. It's all because of Matthew. It's a longer one, almost 2 hours and 45 minutes, but it will break it down and explain how all of this was missed. And the number one answer, outside of being the time, is because the whole world for hundreds of years has been taught from the Gospel of Matthew. And when your foundation is in the Gospel of Matthew, unbeknownst to everybody, they don't realize Mark and Luke are speaking to different people, so they teach us everything from Matthew with a little bit of Mark and even less from Luke. And then people go into the other books of Scripture, and they could see things that are pre-trib and things that are mid-trib and things that are post-trib. And then they dispute and they argue over it. Once you realize there are 3 portions, Luke, Mark, and Matthew, in the 14 years and above, you'll realize the understanding of pre, mid, and post. And as you go into more of these teachings, you'll find it here in this one. You'll see the discourses revealed like never before. The tribes in the wilderness will be revealed. The 7 churches of the end of days will open up, and it will blow your mind. So these are the first 4 that I always recommend. You can do it, like I said, they're on YouTube right here, or you can go to ministryrevealed.com and watch from there. All right? So with that, brothers and sisters, sip of coffee and time to get the party started. And I'm telling you, prepare your minds, get ready, because this is going to be jarring to many, most, if not all, at least to one level or another, because we've never been taught this. And like I said before, there are some that have understood this difference from John compared to Luke, Mark, Matthew. Okay? But there's way more that comes from it. But we'll explain that as well. Okay? So let's get started by this word that I told you that jumped out at me when I went into it this time. Let's go right here. You guys know this very well. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 19. Now, chapter 19 of Leviticus was revealed to us several years ago. And we understood that this was about when they came into the land of Jerusalem. Okay? It wasn't the land that the Lord gave them. We'll cover that in a moment as well. But it was in relation when they come into the land being Jerusalem. Okay? And it says, and shall have planted all manner of trees for food, then shall you count the fruit thereof uncircumcised 3 years. They couldn't take from it for 3 years from when they came into and had control over Jerusalem. Shall it, for 3 years shall it be uncircumcised unto you, it shall not be eaten of. Okay? So in the beginning, excuse me, we were trying to figure it, does it go at the beginning? Does it go at the end of 70 years? And we were trying to understand all these different pieces, right? And then it came to the 4th year, and then there was the 5th year, and all these things continued within these 3 verses to reveal themselves and become much more intricate and detailed over the last couple of years, especially in this final year, which I believe in Nisan of this year, we are now in the final 70th year. And you guys will remember that it says, when you shall come into the land. Well, when did they actually come into the land of Jerusalem? They didn't receive Jerusalem till sometime in the spring, and officially it became their capital in around late spring, summer of 1950. Okay? Late spring, summer of 1950 was when they got Jerusalem. And it said what? Well, then it said that when they came into the land and it was theirs, they needed to start planting trees. Well, the New Year of Trees doesn't happen till around January or February. So they came into the land and they didn't start planting trees until late in the year, January, February. And then Nisan starts. From Nisan would now be year one in Nisan of 1951. So it says 3 years you can't take from it. So what do you have? You have 1 year, and where's the New Year of Trees? There's the anniversary of the New Year of Trees. There's the planting. There's the anniversary of the New Year of Trees right in here before Nisan, and then you get to Nisan. So there's year one with Nisan, with New Year of Trees in it. There's year two, second year within it. There's third year, right here, from Nisan to Nisan, and right in here before Nisan was the third New Year of Trees. But then what does it say? Then it says this little word, this little tiny important word. I don't know what the technical term is for it, but I could tell you when these little things like this are discovered, it always blows me away. My wife's been telling me for years. She's like, I know the Spirit is working through you because you suck at English. You could barely spell properly, and you're catching words like in and comma and realizing what they mean and how they separate differences. I mean, it's incredible. Well, this was that word that we suddenly realized a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, this word in, which means they had to come into the land, and the New Year of Trees obviously didn't happen as soon as they came into the land, because it says in the 4th year, all the fruit thereof is holy and unto the Lord. 4th year started at Nisan 1, and it goes to Nisan here, right? Or Adar 29, if you will. But the New Year of Trees is right in here, right? It's right in this place right here, which means in the 4th year is the time of the New Year of Trees. And that 4th year is to give to the Lord from when they first had Jerusalem and having planted the trees in that year. Okay? So it always means at some time in the midst. And when we're talking about years, it's in the midst of the year. Okay? It's not talking about the beginning. It's talking somewhere in the midst of it. Well, this is the revelation that's going to get carried over that got me going into this count with the days. And it's really going to shock you. Like I said, the first part, when we get into it, some of you might say, I did understand that. I didn't understand it at all. But as we go deeper, I think that's where many of you are going to be blown away. So in the 4th year was to give to the Lord, praise to the Lord, right in here in the 4th year. But then what does it say about the 5th year? We recently covered this, right? This is what got us to this year being the final 70th year. And we know why 70 is so important. In Leviticus 19:25, it says, and in the 5th year shall you eat of the fruit thereof, that it may yield unto you the increase thereof. So you had to do all of these things, including this, so that from that time forward, it would continue to give you the increase thereof. Which means they also had to fulfill this, which means in the 5th year, they had to eat from the fruit thereof, that it may yield unto you the increase. This is the year count that had to be added right here, this 5th year. And in the 5th year, so right in here, before the end of the year, sometime in the midst, in this case, we know because it's the New Year of Trees, they had to then eat the fruit thereof. Okay? And then what happens? From Nisan, from the end of the 5th year, Nisan now starts what? 70 years. And where does it take us? As you guys know, it takes us to 2025 to 2026 Nisan, the end of 70 years, and the 14 years begin. What comes before? The 50 days come before. Okay? Things that we've broken down. So what was the big deal with this? Why am I showing it to you? Because it was the first time we discovered the importance of this word in the year. The only way it could have been in the fourth or in the fifth is if when they came into the land, within the midst of the year, they had to then plant, and then the year came to an end later, and from the next year forward began year one, because they had to come into the land and then plant trees. That's the only way you're going to get in the fourth and in the fifth. Okay? So it was a big deal. Well, then what happened? Well, then just over the past 3 months or so, we got the revelation, maybe a little bit longer, right? But I think it was this year, not prior. We then got this, the word in. We finally came to realize that Leviticus 25, verse 2 said, when you come into the land, is that it? Nope. Which I give you. So what land did he give to them? Israel. Jerusalem is a count on the Nisan side. Israel is a count on the sowing and reaping side. The land that he gave them was the land of Israel. And when did they come into the land? They came into the land, Leviticus 25:2, excuse me, they came into the land right here in May of 1948. Okay? In May of 1948. And what did it say when they came into the land? 6 years they were to then sow, and then the seventh would be the Sabbath. Okay? Well, it just so happened in this count, as you guys recall, in this count, the reason this count is here is because it was a count all the way back from the birth of Christ and to when he declared the Jubilee in his ministry. We tracked that count, and it fell right in line. How do we know it falls in line? Because they came into the land in May 1948, okay? May 1948, and it said, then what did they have to do? When they came into the land that he gave them, they were to now start sowing. Well, guess what? There's the sowing. Just several months later, it was now time for them to start sowing and reaping, 6 years until the seventh. We followed this all the way through on the sowing and reaping side of years. This is a regular Nisan to Nisan year. This is a Tishri to Tishri year of sowing and reaping. And we tracked this all the way through. And what do we know? We know that at the end of it, we should have a Jubilee at the end of the 14 years on this side. And we know what happens in the first part of the Jubilee, so that the 14 years is also finished on this side when they, in Leviticus 25:13, in the year of Jubilee, which means not at the beginning, but in the midst of the Jubilee year, every man would be returned their possessions. And we found out that that equaled, on the Nisan side, the end of 14 years and above, when Ezekiel 48, when they will all return and receive their portion of land, which is exactly what it was talking about here. In the Jubilee, when they would return and each would receive their portion of land. Okay? Now, why do I bring it up? In relation to the sowing and reaping for Israel on a Tishri count, well, you'll recall this word that was again realized just a few months ago in Leviticus 25, verse 4. Listen to this. But in the seventh year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land. You will neither sow nor prune. No sowing and no reaping. But when does this no sowing and no reaping start? In the seventh year. If it's no sowing and no reaping in the seventh year, they came into the land, they started sowing and reaping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it says in the seventh year is a Sabbath of rest. Well, how could you have a Sabbath of rest starting in the middle of a sowing and reaping year? Obviously you can't. So what was it saying? It was from the seventh year when you came into the land. You see? So they came into the land, they started sowing and reaping. They came into the land in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the seventh year from when they came into the land in 1948. And what does it say? In the seventh year shall be a Sabbath year of rest, no sowing and no reaping. Well, what was it? So what is it? It's in the midst of the 7th year. There'll be no sowing and no reaping for that year. Okay? So this became a big deal and helped us finally realize that this count was unequivocally in order now. With all my heart, I believe it is unequivocally in order. Not only did it line up for the land, which is Jerusalem, in the 70-year count, but it literally equaled from the time of Christ, continuing a count of 6 and 7 years, and the Jubilee all the way through, that it just so happened they landed in a year 1 starting, and it would then be the time of sowing and reaping. Which means, do you understand what that means? It means this is the only year, this right here, when they came into the land in 1948 and then started sowing and reaping. Do you realize if we go one more year, then this would be when they came into the land? That's impossible. If it was 1 year before, it would have been the 6th, and it wouldn't have lined up with the count all the way from Christ. If we didn't understand on the year side of Nisan, if we didn't finally understand this final 5th year, we would have fallen one short, and it wouldn't have made sense on the 70-year side. This is the only year that we are currently in where it all lines up. And what helped us to understand it? What was the key word in all of it? In. This was only one of the ins here. Of course, there was more, right? How about this? How about the Jubilee year? In the Jubilee year, so Leviticus 25:13 that we just talked about a moment ago, look what it says. In the year of Jubilee, you shall return every man unto his possession. At the start of the year, at the Jubilee, on the Jubilee? No. In the year of the Jubilee. Whenever there's the word in, means it's not the start of it, it's not the whole of it, it's in the midst of it. And we understood that because when we revealed the differences between remember the open books, right? The chapters to years, what confirmed, what was a big confirmation of it was, of course, the book of Ezekiel, and the book of Ezekiel pointing to the end of the 14th year right here as chapter 48 to begin this next year. And what did it say? Every man was receiving their own land, which was their promise. And what would that be? In the Jubilee year. So we have in the Jubilee year that lined up to the open books and the chapters to years that we had for years. We see that it has to be a Tishri before Nisan. And when we did this count, we did it all the way from when they received Jerusalem as their capital, from when they came into the land of Israel, and these counts were correlated all the way back from the time of Christ's ministry. That is awesome. And these are the types of things that should remind everybody to get excited. Yes, there's going to be ups and downs of life between now and the time we're looking, but be excited. Remind yourself of what you know and what we've been revealed, because it's a big, big deal. All right? So now, what are we going to go into? And you're going to understand why I wanted to bring up the whole in, okay? We're going to go into this right here. We are going to go into the Passover week, which, for the record, I always thought Passover was one day. It's not. Okay? There is a day called the Lord's Passover, but the entire week of unleavened bread, the 7 days, is the Passover. Yes, you heard that right. All 7 days are the Passover, and I'm going to prove it to you, not only with wording, but with what the text, not only tell us in the Gospels, but what the law itself tells us. Are you ready for this? Watch this. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 23. Let's go to our eSword. This, by the way, is a program I use called eSword. So you can download KJV Plus and all sorts of different Bibles and the Strong's Concordance with it, so it's at your fingertips. This is a major piece that helped grow my understanding over the last 7.5 years. This is the multiplier in your understanding, to understand what words mean and what the root word comes from, and give you greater definition and understanding. Okay? So let's go. And no, I'm not sponsored by them. I've just been using them since before day one. Okay? So now watch this. Let's go. I mean, I got to tell you guys right off the bat. I know I said it at the beginning, but get ready. Okay? Be ready to hear things you haven't heard before. Get ready to scratch your head. Be ready to pause and rewind, because we're going to go into some weeds here. All right? So here we have again, just like the years. Remember what I said, what we showed in years, because of the word in, we're going to show in days. Okay? We have 6 days, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. That's not very hard to figure out, is it? So if we can understand where the Sabbath is, then we should be able to understand the closer time frame of Passover, maybe. Well, watch what happens first. This is going to be something we're not going to specifically focus on in the 6th to the 7th, but we'll add it into the mix, because it should cause us all to pause and question when it is and where it is. Okay? Then we go to Leviticus 23 verse 5, and you see it right off the bat, don't you? In. You see that right there? In. How perfect is that? We've suddenly got the word in again. And this word in is talking about in the 14th day of the first month, which is at evening. Did you catch that? The 14th day of the first month. So from here, we'll call this right here. Okay, see these lines on the calendar? We'll call this sunrise to sunrise. Okay? From sunrise to sunrise. But haven't we all been told the Jews count all their days from evening to evening? No, it turns out they don't. They count the feasts. Hello. The Sabbaths, the feasts, all of the feasts of the Lord are counted from evening to evening. From evening to evening are the Lord's feasts. That, right off the bat, had never dawned on me before. In fact, it hadn't dawned on me so much that I went to go look it up. And when I did, just to see, in the Bible, the 6th hour refers to around noon, 12 p.m., according to the Jewish system of timekeeping, which starts the day at sunrise. Wait, the Jews start their day at sunrise? That's the start of the day? From sunrise to sunrise? Yep. Can we prove it? I just did. In the 14th day of the first month at even, okay? At the evening, at the dusk, at the going down of the sun. The only way it could be in the 14th day is if it started with sunrise. Sunrise to sunrise. Which means, here's your 14th day, sunrise, to sunrise in the month of Nisan, month 1. Which means this is the time of the Passover. Okay? That's the time of the Passover. We're going to touch on some things. You see, I went to go look up at Moon Giant to find out the times of the moon. They call it new moon. This isn't new moon. This is dark moon. So March 29th was dark moon, and March 30th was about 3% visible of the moon, which means they would have seen the crescent on the 30th. So that means this is day 1. Okay? This is Nisan 1 right here. Not dark moon, new moon. The dark moons are always the last day, and the crescent is the first day of the month on the Hebrew calendar. Did you know that? This is from evening to evening, okay? This is their declaration right here, and this is Nisan 1 from sunrise to sunrise. Now, it just so happens it starts on a Sunday, right? But this is, again, excuse me, only because we're in April. If you go further, it goes off by a day, off by another day, right? Because of the way the sun plays. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Shouldn't that be the Sabbath? The 7th from evening to evening? Which means what? Which means this is actually the weekly Sabbath. From the evening of the 13th to the evening of the 14th, only this year, okay? If it was, let's go to Ayar, just as an example, because every month obviously doesn't land the same way. It would have been here. This would be the Sabbath, and it would appear that this would be the Sabbath, and this would be the Sabbath. I used to say the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. But we could prove the moon, and this is Nisan 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, wait a second. What did Scripture say about the Sabbath? 6 days, and the 7th is a Sabbath. And you're going to see that the feasts and the holy convocations of the Lord happened from evening to evening. Which means, if this is the 7th, and it goes from evening to evening, this is the Sabbath. That doesn't sound too hard to understand, does it? But it certainly had me scratching my head. I'd always said it wasn't from day 1, but from day 2, because I always thought day 1 was where the dark moon was. And when I went and looked it up, compared to the Hebrew calendar, the dark moon is always the last day of the month. And the first day of the month is the crescent moon. What? So what we find out is it said 6 days, and the 7th is the Sabbath, which means this is the Sabbath. Which means from Nisan 13 to Nisan 14, from evening to evening, this is what? This is the Sabbath, brothers and sisters. This is the weekly Sabbath. It just so happens, I want you to remember this. It just so happens that, yes, the Jews would say, see, this is the Sabbath. It's a Friday to Saturday. It's only landing like that in April this year, okay? Some months it does, some months it doesn't. If we come, like I said, into May, and we know that this is the crescent moon, and this is dark moon, you come to the crescent moon, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is the true Sabbath. This is the true Sabbath. Was it rocket science? Was this a big fancy mystery? No. It said 6 days, and the 7th is the Sabbath. And they go from evening to evening on all the Lord's holy convocations and feasts, which means this was the Sabbath before Passover this year. Well, then when was Passover? For those of you who have been around with the ministry for a while, you'll remember I used to think this was the Passover. I used to think this was the evening Passover, and this is where the Lord had his Passover meal, was taken into the hands of sinful men, crucified here on the 14th in the day, and put in the grave, and then was in the grave, and resurrected on the day right here. Okay? That's pretty standard for most, isn't it? It's pretty standard. But it's wrong. This, the evening of the 13th to the evening of the 14th, is the weekly Sabbath. Watch what it says. Watch what it says about the Passover. In the 14th day. Where's the Passover? Not here. It's in the 14th day, and the 14th day goes from sunrise to sunrise. But when did he say the Passover was? At the start of the 14th day? No. He said at sunset. Right at the time of dusk, at the time of sunset. In the 14th day, which is a sunrise to sunrise, it says at even, or the time of evening, night, is the Lord's Passover. Is the Lord's Passover. So, we might say, okay, well, that's not a big deal. I know you used to say from here to here, Alan, but some of us, we still believe that and understood that the Passover was in the evening of the 14th. Okay? So, this is unequivocal. This is the evening of the 14th. Okay? Not hard to figure out. When is this time? Passover, evening of the 14th. And Jews, according to how it played out this year, they would have also said this was their Sabbath, but only because they go Friday to Saturday, week in and week out. Okay? But there's a big issue. Because if this is the Sabbath, and this is the Passover, there's a problem. There's a big problem. Okay? A huge problem. Let's go to Numbers 9, and we'll go back and look at some more in Leviticus 23 in a little bit. In Numbers chapter 9, this is all about Passover and then the second Passover, okay? In the first month, let the children of Israel also keep the Passover at his appointed season in the 14th day of the month at evening. There's your confirmation. In case you weren't going to believe it at the beginning, there it is again. And they kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even. Okay? Passover began at the evening. When did they go and prepare the lamb? At the evening. As the sun was going down, they would bring that lamb in to slaughter. Oh, I'm going to show that to you as well. Now, there were those who couldn't keep the Passover because they were defiled by the body of a dead man, and, there were different reasons. And what do we see about them being allowed when they went to Moses, and Moses went to the Lord, and he gave them a second Passover? He said the 14th day of the second month at even. So, do you know when the Passover is? The Lord's Passover, the specific time of the sacrifice of the sheep, right, of the lamb, is right here in the evening. And what does it say? It says, and you cannot keep the parts that are uneaten, okay? And they shall leave none of it until morning. And if they couldn't eat it, they had to burn it. Whether it was first Passover or second Passover, none of it was to be left until morning. Okay? At sunrise, there could be none left, or the major trouble. All right? Which means what? Which means the Passover was only the evening right here of the 14th of Nisan? Well, let's get a little bit more detail. Let's go to Exodus chapter 12. In Exodus chapter 12, here we are. When the Lord gave Moses, he told him when the beginning of the months were and the beginning of the days. He told him that in Leviticus, where am I? In Exodus 12, verse 5, your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You shall take it out from the sheep or the goats, and you shall keep it until the 14th day. Okay? They took it from the 10th, and they were to keep it until the 14th day of the same month. And listen to this. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it, look at this, in the evening. When was the Passover sacrifice? Excuse me. In the evening, right here, of Nisan 14. In the evening. I want you to pay attention to this. In the evening of Nisan 14. Okay? The evening of Nisan 14. And it goes on to say, and they shall take the blood and strike it on the two side posts and on the upper doorpost. Now, this is a little side note. Those of you, we know about the striking, right? We know what happened. We know there's an again. Well, what if one of the strikes on the upper doorpost represented the first time, and the striking on the two side posts, just like the two witnesses, as you guys know about the again, is the purpose also revealing the second time? Hello. That was an interesting side note. Okay? Now listen to what it says in verse 8. And they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire, and unleavened bread. So when are they eating the unleavened bread? Well, they're eating it at the night with Passover. They're eating at night in the evening of the 14th with the Passover lamb. It says, you shall eat it with your loins girded, in case you have to go in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. Then it goes on to say in verse 15 of Exodus 12, 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread. In the first day, you'll put all the leaven out of your houses. So it became very strict, remember, that they absolutely would not eat leaven or enter into a home that had leaven. Okay? It was an absolute faux pas. They couldn't do it. It was a sin. They couldn't go in to a place where there was leaven or risk the chance of it. Okay? And it says, and in the first day there shall be a holy convocation. What? See that? This is so awesome. In the first day there shall be a holy convocation. Okay? Where's the first day? Well, I'm going to show you that if it starts here and goes to here as the first day of unleavened bread, remember, it's a feast and the holy convocations to the Lord. This is the first day of unleavened bread. From the evening of the 14th at Passover until the evening of the 15th. This evening portion is the Passover that he said you would do in the 14th day. So from here to here is morning to morning, sunrise to sunrise, and in the evening at sundown is when you're going to go and kill and prepare that lamb, and you're going to eat it that night. But you're going to eat it that night with unleavened bread. And in and in the first day, which means what? In the midst of it. So in the daytime portion is going to be a holy convocation, which means in day one of unleavened bread is a holy convocation, which means the first day of unleavened bread, the first portion of it, the evening portion of the first day of unleavened bread, is Passover. It's Passover. This is why when I would look to the Gospels for years, I would just be scratching my head. How is it unleavened bread and Passover? It didn't make any sense to me. Now it does. This is Passover, the Lord's Passover, when he took them out. You see, and when he took them out and led them out, he goes on to say many things, but look at what comes next. Okay? In the first day shall be a holy convocation, and in the seventh day, okay? In the first and in the seventh, which means in the seventh would be what? Well, here's the first day, right? We just covered it from Passover itself, which is just one evening of the literal Passover, but the whole rest of the week is also Passover, and I'm going to prove it to you. And it says, in the first day is a holy convocation, and in the seventh day is a holy convocation. If it's saying in, and it's the time of the holy convocation, clearly you have the evidence again that it goes from evening to evening for the feast, because in it, which is the daytime, is the time of their holy convocation when they will what? Do no servile work. There's no working. It's a holy convocation. Okay? It's a holy convocation in the first day, and it's a holy convocation in the seventh day. And what does it say? No manner of work shall be done in them. Okay? So it's a type of Sabbath. Okay? Is it because it is? I'm telling you guys, I know I'm jumping in on this, but what I'm going to show you as we get further in is really going to have to rewire some connections, because the first day is a holy convocation. It's not a Sabbath. It's a holy convocation. The second one isn't specifically a Sabbath. It's a holy convocation. But could one of these be the first one or the second one in the first day? So, which is in the day portion of day one is a holy convocation, and in the day portion of the seventh is a holy convocation. Is it possible that one of these is also a Sabbath? Is it possible that one of them is also a Sabbath? Meaning what? Meaning either this is a Sabbath or this is a Sabbath. One of these two is a Sabbath. Well, didn't we just cover that the actual weekly Sabbath is right here? If the actual weekly Sabbath is right here, and this is Passover, how on earth is this a holy convocation and a Sabbath? Well, it's not. But what if we come over here? Is this not the Sabbath? And this becomes the holy convocation within a Sabbath? It sure does. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. It's so awesome. Listen to what it says. In Exodus 12, verse 18. I love this word now. In the first month of the 14th day of the month at even, okay, listen carefully. Listen carefully. In the first month on the 14th day, so in the first month on the 14th day at, well, this in isn't such a big deal because it's saying within the month, right? Which is what? The midst of the month at the 14th day? Hello. So in the first month on the 14th day of the month at evening, what day is that? What takes place on the 14th day of the first month at evening? Well, Passover, right? In the 14th day at even is the Lord's Passover. Okay. You see where I'm getting at? That's the Passover. But do you know what it says next? You shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even or sunset. So what does that mean? You're eating unleavened bread here from the evening of the 14th, and you're eating it until the evening, you're eating it from the evening of the 14th, and you're eating it until the evening of the 21st. Did you see what that said? It says, in the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at even, so at sunset, which is Passover, the Lord's Passover, you're going to eat unleavened bread. And you're going to continue to eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. Meaning it ends on the 21st, right here. When evening comes, right here, it's over. So you're going to eat it until right here. And that is your what? That is your 7 days of unleavened bread. I, even up till about a week ago, or just a few days ago since this started, I even sent a message to Jake in one of the emails where I was frustrated because I told him, dude, I am so frustrated because I don't understand for the life of me why the Jews keep telling us that the Passover is in unleavened bread. It made no sense to me. It's crystal clear to me now. You see, it's amazing that when it's time to see something, the Spirit, bam, opens it up. And what did it take? The word in from Leviticus 19. The word in being confirmed and showing us again the difference within the calendars and doing those counts. It proved out the calendars right at the time when we needed them both to be understood together instead of battling back and forth which one it was going to be, realizing that it was both. And it had to be one starting before the other. From that, this is what opened up. And when my eye saw the in and my spirit received it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. Because not only does this clarify a whole bunch, it's going to leave you scratching your head on something even bigger. On something that will get even bigger. Okay? So then we know Moses, he takes them out. They kill the Passover lamb. When do they kill the Passover lamb? At the sunset, right? That's when they go and prepare it, at sunset of the 14th. And then they cook it and eat it. And why do they do it? Because look at what happened. Pharaoh woke up at midnight. See, and it came to pass at midnight that the Lord smote all the firstborn in Egypt. When is that? When was that? Right here. Right here in the evening time. Right here in the evening time at midnight. Still in the evening. And what happens? Pharaoh rose up. Look what it says. In the night. These are important details for the scripture to give us. Because Pharaoh did this in the Pharaoh woke up in the evening. And then look at what it says. Verse 31, Exodus 12. And he called Moses and Aaron by night, reassuring us and letting us know that all of this is taking place on the evening of the 14th. What does he tell them to do? Rise up, get all your people, all the children of Israel, go and serve your God. Get out of here, take the herds, take all this. They ended up giving them a bunch of jewelry and going to them, and they left what? They left that evening. That's why we see the scriptures that say you're going to observe this forever for remembrance of when I led you out of Egypt. Well, when he says he led them out of Egypt, I always thought it was the 15th. It was. Because this is the evening of the 14th from a sunrise to sunrise, which is the 14th, which is the Passover evening. But from evening to evening is also unleavened bread, and this is the beginning of the 15th to here. From an evening to an evening count is the 15th. So when did they flee out? They fled out here in the evening, which we would say is the 14th, but it's also what? The 15th in relation to unleavened bread, because the feasts and the Sabbaths and all these things to the Lord and the holy convocations all go from evening to evening. It's all right there in Scripture for us. There is a day, a sunrise to sunrise, and everything else goes from sunset to sunset. Passover, the evening of the 14th, is Nisan 15, because it goes from evening to evening. No wonder so many of us had been scratching our heads like crazy. Well, what about Deuteronomy 16? Let's go have a look at this. Look at this. Observe the 14th of Abib and keep the Passover. Thou shalt eat no leavened bread with it. 7 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. 6 days shalt thou eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly, right? Again, the holy convocation, to the Lord thy God. 7 weeks shalt thou number, and then it goes on to the numbering, okay? So we're seeing what? We're seeing that there's going to be 6 days worth. And then the 7th is the solemn assembly, okay? The 7th day is the solemn assembly. Well, when we talk about this as years, we've broken down Deuteronomy 16. Deuteronomy 16 is the revelation of the 14 years of the end of days and the Feast of Weeks as the above, which we know is going to happen 4 months earlier. Okay? But I want you to catch something. Look what it says. 6 days, and then the 7th day is a solemn assembly. Was the first day a solemn assembly? I really want you to pay attention here. Was the first day of unleavened bread, the first of the 6, was it a solemn assembly? No, it was a holy convocation in the day portion, but was it a solemn assembly? No. Why is the 7th day a solemn assembly? Because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and then the 7th day. What does that remind you of? What does that remind you of? You mean like a Sabbath? Meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? This is the Sabbath, and it's also the 7th day of unleavened bread, the time of the solemn assembly, and it would happen what? In the day of the 7th, which is the time of the holy convocation, which means it would be taking place on the Sabbath, which means this date of unleavened bread, unlike any other date or day of unleavened bread, this right here is the only one that is a Sabbath and a high Sabbath. I want you to hear that again. This is the only one that can be a Sabbath and a high Sabbath, because 1, yes, it's a Sabbath, but 2, it's the 7th day of unleavened bread and the solemn assembly and holy convocation, making only the 7th day, just like it said in Deuteronomy 16, not day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6, but only the 7th day, which means this day, as a solemn assembly and a holy convocation, is a high Sabbath, my brothers and sisters. Oh yes, you're going to want to remember that, because your entire paradigm of Passover is about to explode. Watch this. Let's keep this going. It's so crazy. It is so crazy. Once you see it, once you get it, when you study it out and you understand it, it is going to explode your mind. And it's going to leave you, like I said, just scratching your head saying, Lord, is this possible? How is this possible after everything we've been told? Well, Be ready. Watch this. Let's go to John chapter 13. So John chapter 13 is the same timing as like Luke 22, Mark 14, Matthew 26. Okay, that time, not the Passover meal, right, specifically, but right around the time of Passover. And there's something that almost everybody has missed about it. John chapter 13. Listen to this. Most people believe, yes, it's the beginning, it's before Passover. But as the story goes on, people think that it's then, there was Passover there. But in the Gospel of John, my brothers and sisters, there ain't no Passover from chapter 13 forward. Is there a Passover? Well, of course there is. Is it mentioned in John chapter 13 forward? Nope. No, it isn't. What is mentioned? Let's start in verse 1. Now, before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of this world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. Is this Passover? No, it says it's before Passover. Most people who have studied into this, or the things that I've looked up, believe that it was the evening of the 13th right here. That they were having a meal right here on the evening of the 13th. Okay, which would have been what? This would have been, of course, the Sabbath. They would have been having a meal right here. Okay? And then it says, and the supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him. Did the devil enter Judas yet? Nope. It was only put into his heart to now deceive him. Okay, to now betray him. This was a supper. It was not yet the Passover, which means it was most likely the evening of the 13th. We keep reading. I think it even says something again about supper. Okay, but now we'll keep reading. So we know they had this meal. Most likely, I would almost 100% certain that it would have been the 13th. You'll see why in a moment. Because now Satan put it in Judas's heart to betray him. Okay? But he did not yet enter him. And then Jesus goes on to tell them things, washing their feet and why he's doing it and why they should do it of themselves as well. Now listen to this. He now goes into the story of one that will betray him. John 13:21. When Jesus had thus said, he was troubled in spirit and terrified, and said, Verily, verily, I say unto you, that one of you shall betray me. Then the disciples looked one on another, doubting of whom he spake. Now listen to this. This is a piece of clarity that you're going to see in the differences of the Gospels that is going to begin to give you an understanding that will lead to the next piece. Now there was leaning on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples whom Jesus loved. We'll say John, right? A lot of people believe it was the Apostle John. Simon Peter, therefore, beckoned unto him. Who? John, the one who Jesus loved, leaning on his bosom, that he should ask. So Simon Peter is saying to John, hey, John, you should ask Jesus of whom he is speaking. He then, lying on Jesus' breast, said unto him, Lord, who is it? I want you to make a note and put this conversation in your memory bank, because in a moment we're going to go see what another couple Gospels tell us. And you tell me if it's the same story. But we have to finish this before you understand where we are in the storyline. John 13:26. Excuse me. John 13:26. Jesus answered, He it is to whom I shall give a sop when I have dipped it in. So only John asks him because Simon Peter asked John. And the Lord tells him, it's going to be the one to who I give the sop when I have dipped it. Excuse me. And then what happens? And when he had dipped the sop, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon. You would think they would have figured it out right there, right? Do you realize they didn't yet figure it out? While he was having this conversation and telling them, he dips the sop and gives it. And obviously this happened after the meal, so while they were still hanging out, he dips this sop and he gives it to Judas. And they're scratching their heads on who it was because they didn't realize he was talking like immediately. They still didn't figure it out. And then look what happens. Verse 27. And after the sop, Satan entered him. This is another one you're going to want to remember. After the sop, Satan entered him. Then said Jesus unto him, That thou doest, do quickly. So now they heard Jesus say, That thou doest, do quickly, and they heard him say it to Judas. But they didn't understand why. So it says, Now no man at the table knew for what intent he spoke this unto him. Listen carefully. For some of them thought, because Judas had the bag, that Jesus had said unto him, Buy those things that we have need of, listen to this, against the feast. Meaning what? Obviously, it wasn't Passover yet. It wasn't Passover. They thought Jesus had said that to Judas because he had the bag of money, so that he obviously was then going to be going to buy some things that we still needed for the feast. You see? Before the feast. Or they thought that maybe he should give something to the poor. And then, having received the sop, went out immediately, and it was night. So it was still the evening that they had that meal. Meaning, we're still talking about, right here, on the evening of the 13th, is when these things happened. On the evening of the 13th, it was the Sabbath meal that they were having. Okay? Now, watch what comes next. Let's go into Luke chapter 22. In Luke chapter 22, we now read some very important details to keep this story going. Luke 22, verse 1. Now, say it out loud, now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh. Okay? It wasn't yet the feast of unleavened bread. Wait, what? Which is called the Passover. Now the feast of unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover. So the feast of unleavened bread is called the Passover. Hello. Right there in black and white. Or colored words, right? When was the Passover? Right here is the Passover, and it's the first day of unleavened bread. So the feast of unleavened bread is Passover. So what is the feast of unleavened bread? This is the feast of unleavened bread. What does the feast of unleavened bread start with? The slaughtering of the lamb and the literal Passover meal. But is this all of Passover, or is it a whole week of Passover? It's a whole week of Passover. That's why the Jews say Passover, feast of unleavened bread, Passover, feast of unleavened bread, Passover, feast of unleavened bread, because unleavened bread is Passover. It's right there in black and white with some pretty colors. The feast of unleavened bread is Passover. But now listen carefully. Pay attention to verse 3. Then entered Satan into Judas. When did Satan enter into Judas in John 13? Remember what happened first. Judas put it in the heart, or sorry, Satan, the devil put it in the heart of Judas. It wasn't until after the sop that Satan entered him. Satan did not enter him until after the sop. Well, do you know if you do a word search on sop? Let's look at it real quick. Let's go to John chapter 13. The word sop is used 4 or 6 times. 4 times. Do you know where all 4 of these are used? Yeah, you guessed it. 1, 2, 3, 4 times in John chapter 13. Why? Because it was after the sop that Satan entered into Judas. So when we go to Luke's gospel and we get to the gospel of the discourses, we see here in Luke in 22 verse 3 that Satan entered into Judas. Did Satan enter into Judas on Passover? Nope. It was the night before when they had the meal on the Sabbath. That's when he entered Judas. So look what happens. He gets the money, and look what comes next. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. When does the Passover get killed? Where was that? When does the Passover get killed? In the evening of the 14th is when they kill the Passover lamb, right? When they kill the sheep or the goat. So, what do we see? What time is this? Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. So, what time is it now? It's right here. It's at the time of evening, right here, on the 14th. It's the time when the Passover must be killed. And Satan entered Judas the night before. So look at this difference right here. This right here is already, what, close to, well, maybe not quite 24 hours, right? Maybe 18 hours, somewhere in there. Just a couple verses, 2-3 verses, and all of a sudden we're jumping by almost a day. We see this everywhere in Scripture. We see from one chapter to the next, and in the Old Testament we see it so often where it could jump by years or decades. We see in the New Testament from one verse to the next could be a difference of 2 years. We see this all over the place. And it is the evidence for what you're about to see that I'm showing, that I'm building to you next, which I already started showing you. But something should start ringing out to you right now. What time is it? It's the Passover time. It's the time of Passover when they must kill the Passover. And what does Jesus say in Luke 22, verse 8? And he sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare us the Passover, that we may eat." Wait, isn't Jesus being our sacrifice on literal Passover? Nope. Now I hear a bunch of you screaming at me through the screen. Jesus was our Passover lamb. Jesus was sacrificed on the 14th at Passover. No, he wasn't. I don't even really have to say too much. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. That's the evening of the 14th at sunset. And he sent them out that they may go and prepare the Passover, that we may eat it. that Jesus would eat the Passover with his disciples. And he goes on, and we know the story of the is to come, right? And the man with the pitcher of water and all that awesomeness, right? And what it leads to, they go to the place, and where is the guest chamber where I shall prepare the Passover with my disciples? And he shall show you a large upper room furnished, there make ready. And what did they do? Verse 13, and they made ready the Passover. Do you know what happens when we go to Mark chapter 14? Look at what Mark says. In Mark chapter 14, we've got the 2 days before the feast of Passover and unleavened bread, okay? So it's a couple days out. And then look at this. We've got the betrayal, and here's now the first day of unleavened bread when they killed the Passover. So we just went from a few verses earlier, 2 days before, and all of a sudden, we have the conversation of Passover. How many days just passed? 2 days within a few verses. Okay? But listen to what he says here. When they killed the Passover, where wilt thou that we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? And he sendeth forth 2 of his disciples. Go to the man bearing the pitcher of water. We know this in the is to come. It is awesome, right? But we are looking tonight through the lens of the is of what happened. He says, and there make ready. So they're going to prepare the Passover. And look what happens. Get ready. You know, unless you've put a lot of thought into this and not just accepted the scenario that's been told to you, which I was part of it until this too, because I couldn't fully make sense of what was happening. So I just set it off to the side because my main focus is the is to come. It is the revelation and preparing a people for the is to come. That's what we're doing. That's what we have the revelation of. But remember what I've said in the past? The revelation of the is to come doesn't only give us clarity of the is to come and reveal understanding of the is to come. It is also, as we go through the Old and New Testament of the was and the is, we end up getting clarity and greater understanding of the events that took place based on what the revelation of the end of days revealed in the was and is. Like the whole story of the creations, right? From the gap theory to the days, which are the creation of light, to the flesh, which is all about the flesh portion, so the spirit, the light, and the flesh. How did we find that? How did the Spirit lead us to that incredible revelation? That really proved to us that all of creation is going to be 21,000 and then the 22nd thousand new beginning. Whereas the world of church will try and tell you it's 7,000 it will be total. 6,000 and then the millennial reign. No, that's only from the flesh. There was 7,000 years before that were only days. And then there's the gap theory, which we know is a 7-day period representing the 7,000 years if we were there in time, just like the days of creation. It was the revelation of the end of days that revealed that to us. That's what's going on here tonight. It's the revelation of the end of days and these words for in and the understanding that we've received that has opened up greater understanding in the is of what has taken place at Passover. So now look what happens. They prepared the Passover lamb, having killed a Passover lamb, right? The sheep of 1 year. They've killed it and they've prepared it. On Passover, in the evening of the 14th, on the beginning of the first day, in the evening portion, on the first day of unleavened bread. And who shows up? Jesus. Jesus shows up in the evening. So he didn't show up to help them prepare it. They went and prepared it on Passover. And he showed up a little bit later in that evening. So they're preparing. 2 of them go. They find the place. The man with the pitcher of water. He takes them to the place. And They kill the lamb, they kill the sheep, and they prepare it. And Jesus shows up in the midst of that night, probably not too much later, but once it was all prepared. Hello. Am I the one saying this? I'm reading to you what it says. It was the time of Passover when they killed the lamb. They go and prepare it, and Jesus shows up in the same evening, and what does he do? He sits down and has a meal with them. But now, you ready for this? Let's go back to Luke chapter 22, which is telling us essentially the same thing, okay? Just giving different details. Watch this. And let me clarify, giving different details in the is. We know what these different details are revealing about the is to come. And that's even, I mean, as wild as this is, because we've understood these things a certain way all our lives, and now it's being revealed. The is to come revelation of all of it is way deeper. But now watch this. Okay? So then he comes, he eats the Passover with them. There's the Lord's Supper. He's there. He's eating the Passover with them. And listen to what he says. Where is it? Listen to this. Luke 22, verse 21. But behold, the hand of him that betrayeth me is with me on the table. And truly the Son of Man goeth, and as it was determined, but woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed. And they began to inquire among themselves which of them it was that should do these things. And then it goes on to who's the greatest. So what if we go into Mark and see the rest of this story? You see what happened? The reason why so many people believe that the Gospel of John in chapter 13 is also by that point with the sop, thinking it's the Passover, is because the story is repeated in the Synoptic Gospels, but it's not the same story. John's Gospel was the sop from the evening before, and then Satan entering Judas. When we go to Mark and Luke and Mark, and even Matthew, but it's different details, when we go to Mark and Luke, we find out that Satan entered Judas before Passover. So clearly, what's being talked about with the sop is not the same story that we're getting when the Passover comes, which means Satan, who entered Judas, was there with Judas because he was in him at the Passover meal with the Lord. Right? Because look, all 12 were there. All 12 were there. And Jesus was there having a meal, which means even though Judas had Satan enter him, he was still carrying on, thinking he was still the same old guy. Well, listen to what it says now, and you tell me if it's the same story as John. It isn't. Mark 14, starting in verse 18. And as they sat and did eat, Jesus said, Verily I say unto you, one of you which eats with me shall betray me. Listen to what the answer is. Listen to this. And they began, this is what I told you in John 13. I want you to remember what was said about the sop. He tells John the apostle, it will be the one to whom I give the sop after I dip it. And then he dips it and gives it to Judas, and they never realized it was Judas. Judas goes out, and that night Judas is indwelled by Satan. Now the next day at evening, it's Passover. They're having the Passover meal with the Lord, and the 12 apostles are there, which means Judas is still there, indwelt with Satan. And listen to what they answer. And they began to be sorrowful, and to say unto him one by one, Is it I? And another said, Is it I? Hold on a second. Is that what we just read in John 13? Did they all come to him one by one and say, Lord, is it me? Lord, is it me? Nope. That's not at all what we read, is it? They started wondering among themselves, and then Simon Peter beckons John, the apostle, who's on the breast of Jesus, and says, hey, ask him for us who it is. So John, the apostle, leaning on Jesus' chest, says, Lord, who is it? And then he tells him it's the one with the sop. This is not the same story that we read in the Gospels, because it is not the same day. The sop is the night before the Passover, and in the Gospels, it's the story after, the next day, at the true time of Passover, while they're having the Passover meal, they each come to him. Where is it? Oh, sorry, it was in Mark. In Mark 14, they each come to him one by one, proving that, of course, it is not the same night. And we proved it, of course, just by Judas himself. Okay? So again, wait, where am I? One by one they came to Jesus, saying unto him, is it I? And another said, is it I? And in verse 20, Mark 14, he answered and said unto them, it is one of the 12 that dippeth with me in the dish. That dips with me in the dish. That's not the story of John. Jesus dipped the sop and gave it to Judas. This is the next evening at Passover, brothers and sisters. And as they did eat and they drank, Jesus blessed, right? You catching this? So you realize that this is now happening right here in the evening of the 14th, which is the Passover meal. We know the story of why in Matthew 26, why we get the mention that it's specifically said 30 pieces of silver, because in the prophetic, it's connected to what we understand about the again and who Judas represents in the again. And we know why it's in Zechariah chapter 11, which is in the 11th year. It's awesome. We understand why Zechariah is laid out the way it is, right? We understand why Zechariah, in relation to how sowing and reaping comes before the year count, right? Let me just rehash that real quick as a little side note, right? We know that this has to start before this. Before this 70th year comes to an end, there's a period of about 6 months, right? Or you could say 6 months from Tishri 1 to Nisan 1. The 50 days happen in the above portion, and when we go to Zechariah chapter 1, it even starts by talking at the time of Tishri. It's talking in the 8th month. It's talking in the 8th month. And then the 70th year comes to an end, because it's counting from a Tishri side in the book of Zechariah in the Revelation of 14 chapters to 14 years. It's so wild. That was just another side note. I know we covered that recently, which was another mind blower, right? The Gospel of John from 8 to 21, the book of Zechariah and the book of Ezekiel in the open chapters to years. It was awesome, right? So he says, Master, and the Master saith, my time is at hand. Okay. So again, we saw the 30 pieces of silver. It also talked about, I don't know why this went away. Again, we have this conversation of after 2 days being the time of the Feast of Passover. Okay. So what is undeniable, just so you're aware, I know it's a bit of a rocking statement, But I don't know if saying the word statement is appropriate. Okay? It's written in black and white and red and full of colors that Jesus had the Passover meal at the time of the killing of the Passover lamb on the evening of the 14th of the first month. I'll let that soak in for a moment. We've been told he was the Passover lamb sacrifice, right? And of course he is. He is the Passover lamb. But we've all been told that this is, either from here to here or here was when he was sacrificed. It's not possible. It's, in fact, impossible. Because he was having the meal with them of the sacrificed sheep of 1 year, the lamb sheep of 1 year. He was eating it with them. He did not get sacrificed on the 12th or on the evening of the 14th. Well, where was he sacrificed then? Well, of course, let's follow the scenario that we've all come to understand. Okay? Now we go to John 18. So if you follow the story of John, like I said, there is no Passover, which is why it mixes so many people up. It's all about events from the day before, and you get no Passover meal, but you've got when Satan then enters them, and he goes on and explains to them so many things, which we know very well in the prophetic of John, right? Prepare a place for you, chapter 14, the 14th year of seals, right? The 7th year of seals in the big picture. And he tells them all of these things. It's all about him to strengthen them, to encourage them, to remember each other, that he hasn't lost any of them, that they're to produce fruit, and you keep going and going, and you get to chapter 18. And when you get to chapter 18, you have Judas that's going to be coming with those with him because he knows where Jesus goes with his disciples. So he has the band of men, and it's come time for the betrayal. Okay? Saying that it was fulfilled, that I lost none except we know the one, right? And we track it all the way through. He tells that Peter is going to deny him, and we know the whole story. But let's track it. Let's track it. This is where you now really pay close Berean attention, because this is the Sabbath. This is the Sabbath. This is the Sabbath. But then it changes, right? 1, 2, right? This is Crescent Moon Day right here. 1, 2, which is called New Moon Day, right? The beginning of the months. By the way, let me just show you that. We know that in the beginning of the months, in Numbers chapter 28, there's all sorts of different daily offerings and things they had to do, right? Sabbath offerings and what? In the beginnings of your months. And it's the offerings that they had to do. This is the burnt offering of every month throughout your months of the year. New moon. New moon tells us that it is the time of the rebuilding and repairing of the moon. Which means I used to think that this was actually dark moon. And that, like I said earlier, this is where the crescent was. It wasn't until I looked closer and found out that sometimes it's dark moon for 2 days. But on the first of every month where they have Ayar, and on occasion it's off by a day. Okay, we know that with the Hebrew calendar. It could be off by a day. It's crescent moon. Crescent moon is the beginning of the month, which means this is day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So in May this year, it was Sunday into Monday, Sunday into Monday, Sunday into Monday. So clearly, the Jews doing it Friday to Saturday every day cannot be the case, because the new moon, the repairing of the moon, is what starts the month. Now, let me make it so obvious for you. They literally have the start of the days of their months in the right place. So if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, why do you think they still have their Passovers here? Month in, month out, week in, week out, always and forever. Because they changed it to coincide with the Gentile world, to make their life easier, going in a Friday night into a Saturday night, because everybody is quote unquote generally off. That's why they did it. It absolutely, unequivocally, 100% is not the true Passover. And they put it in your face, because there's day 1. Well, then there's day 7, evening to evening. Not rocket science, right? It's right there for us to understand. Now, again, not rocket science, I say, but I used to have it right here. But my reasoning for having it here was because I always thought this was actually the time of dark moon. And then I went and paid closer attention and realized it's always at the end of the month. Okay? On the end of the Hebrew month. Now, this is a Gregorian calendar, but this is the end. And this is when the crescent is seen. And the 30th was actually what? Nisan. Right? Yeah. The 30th was actually Nisan 1. You see? So it looked good for this year in April because it landed starting on a Sunday, and this really was a Sabbath. But it, like I said earlier already, that was just happenstance. It just so happened that it landed that way this year. Okay? But don't let it confuse you thinking that it's always Friday to Saturday. That is not the case. All you have to do is count the days. You see? Just like we do with the years. It's 6 years and the 7th is rest. It's the same thing. So why would it be here? Right? Why would they have it here on the 5th when it's supposed to be over here? Convenience. That's what they've done. Convenience. But now this starts to get really crazy. Because if this is the Sabbath, this is where you got to really tune in. If this is the Sabbath, and this is the 14th day from sunrise to sunrise, this is the Passover. Jesus ate the Passover. He had it with his apostles. And then I'm going to show you now scenario 1. Scenario 1 then says, okay, this is Passover, and it is. And Passover is also in the beginning from an evening to evening, unleavened bread, day 1. But all of unleavened bread is Passover. Okay? This is just the beginning of it with the Passover meal. Now, Jesus was here. The typical story that we understand is that then Jesus goes out and prays, is taken into the hands of sinful men, right? Goes from one to the other, which we see, I think in John 18 and 19, cuts off the ear. He's led away first to Ananias, and then Caiaphas the high priest, and then he goes to another one. He's brought to somewhere else, okay? And we see this all the way through in John chapter 18 until we get to John 19, okay? He's now before Pilate. They say crucify him, give him the robe. They end up exchanging and giving away. They want Barabbas. Who is it now? You know who I'm talking about. Where is he? I don't remember where he is now. Maybe in the last chapter. So they end up exchanging him, right? And so he goes free, and Jesus is going to be crucified. Now, if we track this based on what we read, John doesn't have the Passover, but we have the events that then follow what took place of the Passover in the other Gospels. Okay? So John's Gospel started right here, and then the other Gospels take up right here, where right at this last portion right here, where Judas is now indwelt with Satan, with the devil, and now he's here with them, the 12 apostles, and they're having the meal, and he lets them know in another way, whoever dips with me, he's the one who's going to be betray me. Now, what we generally believe and have understood all these years is that sometime in the evening of the 14th, after the meal, Jesus goes out to pray, and that same evening, he ends up being taken. And when he's taken, you're going to want to pay really close attention. When he's taken, it's believed then by early in the morning. Okay? So if we go to some of the other Gospels, let's go to Mark 15. After they first take him, now it's in the morning. So what is generally believed is that after the meal, the Passover meal, he goes out to pray. He's taken into the hands of sinful men, right? Right here, we've talked about that before. And he goes from one person to the other, and they spit on him, and they do all these things. And then early in the morning, right here, they bring him before Pilate. He wants to wash his hands of it, and they want to crucify him. Okay? And then what happens? Then they crucify him. We've been told this is when they crucify him. After they crucify him, he's put in the grave, which should be right here, right? They crucified him. Now he's in the grave, and he should be in the grave, well, from at least, what? Here to here. He was in the grave like, what? 12 hours? What? It said the third day. You might be able to try and justify and say, well, this is day 12. So this is, or sorry, the 14th day. So you could say, well, it happened on the 14th when he was taken into the hands of sinful men. He was brought before early in the morning, and then he was crucified, and it was the 15th, and then he resurrected early on the 16th. Right? Early in the morning on the 16th. Sounds plausible. This is a day, and this is another day. But in reality, it was later in the evening here. So from here to here, when he gets put in the grave, would be one day. It would be a total of only about a day and a half. Now, have I heard this theory before? Yes, I have. By some prominent people, too. Jews will say any portion of a day is a day. Okay? People have tried to justify that. Any portion of a day is a day. So this is on the 14th. This is on the 15th. This is early on the 16th. Bam. There's your 3 days, even though the total was only a day and a half from crucifixion, put in the grave. From taken to the hands of sinful men, crucified, put in the grave, and resurrected. The whole thing was a day and a half, which means he was only in the grave for about, give or take, 12 hours. Some people think that's the way it happened. Because you know what they've understood? They've understood what I'm telling you now of when the Passover happened. And that Jesus was there eating the Passover. When they killed the Passover, he ate the Passover. So he wasn't crucified at the Passover meal. But was he crucified sometime during Passover? Yes. Because this is Passover. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is Passover. But he clearly had the Passover meal, the Passover of the Lord, of the Father, he clearly had it. So he wasn't killed then. And if we stick to this scenario, he would have been, like we saw, early in the morning, then crucified by noonish or so on the 15th of Nisan, and then he was put in the grave and resurrected 12 hours later, right here, on the 16th day of Nisan. And what do most people call this day? Well, what do the Jews call it? They call this day, and the whole church would call this day what? Feast of First Fruits. Hold on to your horses, brothers and sisters. Hold on to your hats. Hold on tight, because there's something we've wondered about the Feast of First Fruits. And it's probably been wondered at. We know people have gone back and forth on it, but the ability to understand it has completely baffled us. I believe you're about to witness it right now. We're told that this, and I had believed, and we used to bounce back between what? This and this, right? Or like this and this right here. Because I believe this was the Passover before. This was the Sabbath, remember? I used to think it was the 8th, the 15th, 22nd, and 29th. Okay? But now that we understand this isn't the Sabbath, but it's the night before, it's the day before, right? Right here. Whereas I used to believe it was here. Now I understand that it's here. Okay? So it changes what we had for a day, but I still believed that this was the Feast of First Fruits. And you'll recall, we've done many teachings over the years in even discerning the date, that is it really here or is it here? It would have to be one of the two. It seems strange because we're told Passover is the evening of the 14th, and it's the beginning of unleavened bread, and unleavened bread goes until the 21st, which makes this now the first day of the week. This is the first day of the week right here, right? Evening to evening, right? Sunrise to sunrise. This is the first day of the week. Uh-oh, did you catch that? If this is the resurrection, and the total was only a day and a half, as some believe who have sought these things out, and I'm not going to say who, but there was a very prominent one that I remember hearing about years ago, and I heard a lot of his teachings, and he believed that it was only a total of a day and a half from taken to the hands of sinful men, and he would say, see, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Not that it was a full 48, 56 hours or whatever it is, or 60 hours, but that it was a portion of 3 days. But guess what? There's a problem, isn't there? Because if he resurrected right here, what's this day called? Are you ready? Are you ready for this? If we go to the resurrection in Luke 24, now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning. Take a deep breath. Follow what I'm saying. Upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning. Now, Christians might say, well, the church or Catholics might say, this is the first day of the week, it's Monday. Nope. It just so happens that it looks fanciful, that it lines up for the Jews in April, and it lines up on a Monday for the church. This is not the first day of the week, brothers and sisters. Hello, ding, 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 ding. There's another problem, isn't there? If we know it's day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and day 7 is the Sabbath, and this is the Sabbath, and this is the Sabbath, that means the first day of the week which is this, should be connected to early in the morning on the first day of the week for his resurrection, which means this would be the first day of the week in the morning after the Sabbath. Am I stretching something? Is this not the 7th? Is this not the 14th? Was this not the crescent of the moon to start the month? Maybe I should go to 2024. Oh, let's even go to 2026. Just for the ease of looking at it so it doesn't land on a Friday, Saturday for everybody. Okay? Crescent moon in March 19th, Nissan 1, crescent moon. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's the Sabbath. Which means 31st to the 1st of April, there's the second Sabbath. There's your Passover. Right after the Sabbath. Oh, wait a second. The Jews have the Sabbath over here. How's that happen? It doesn't. So now look what happens. Jesus had the Passover meal. They ate the Passover lamb with the unleavened at the time of unleavened bread. This is the first day of unleavened bread, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, right to here. From evening to evening, the 7 days. Sabbath goes from here to here. Meaning Sabbath goes from here to here. If Jesus was taken into the hands of sinful men on the evening of the Passover meal, late at night, and it was early in the morning on the 15th, when he's then brought before Pilate, and then he's crucified on the 15th by afternoon, and is put in the grave, and is in the grave for only about 12 hours or so, and resurrects early in the morning on the 16th, we have a problem. Upon the first day of the week, we can go to any gospel. We can go to any gospel. When the Sabbath was passed, and very early in the morning on the first day of the week. When the Sabbath was passed, very early on the first day of the week. John chapter 20. The first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene early while it was yet dark. On the first day of the week after the Sabbath. There's your resurrection according to the world. There's your resurrection according to the world. Was this the Sabbath? How could this have been the Sabbath? It was Passover. It was the feast of Passover. And the first day of unleavened bread. It wasn't a Sabbath. It was not a Sabbath. You see, what does it tell us about the Sabbath? Well, let's go a little bit further into it. Let's go back to John 19. Actually, no. Let's start by looking at the word preparation. Here's the word for preparation, the Greek word 3904. These are the 6 places that it's used, and it's, of course, only in the Gospels in relation to the crucifixion. Look at what it says. Matthew 27:62. Now, the next day that followed the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees came together for to Pilate. Mark 15:42. And now, when the even was come, because it was preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath. What is preparation day, brothers and sisters? I don't know if many of you know this, but preparation day is the preparing that the Jews do the day before the Sabbath. They have everything prepared and have their meals and stuff ready for the time of Sabbath. Not just their meals, but they prepare everything because on the Sabbath is a day of rest and they can't do any work. So they prepare everything in advance. I remember, for those of you who have been around for a long time, we used to have a sister and her daughter, Messianic Jews, and her husband, was one of these. He's a Cohen, and he's now much older, of course. But back in the day, until he was 20, he was one of these people prepared for something specific at the time of the end that I'm not going to go into. And these people are prepared in secret places around the world. A specific group of Jews of a priestly line. Not Gentiles, Jews. But after a certain age, then they move out and they go and start their life, and there's others that come behind them. And the Jews have been preparing for this for probably centuries. It's pretty crazy. But what she told me is that Jews, what they do to prepare is, for them, this is always the Sabbath, right? So they prepare here. So they prepare on the Thursday, right? From Thursday night and even into Friday morning before sunset. This is really where they'll spend a lot of time preparing so that they don't do anything, because this is the Sabbath day. Okay? This is the preparation. Okay? Whether it's the whole day or just the day portion, it's this time before is the day of preparation. This is really important for us, guys. Excuse me. Because we're told now the next day that followed the day of preparation. Okay? And now, when even was come, because it was the preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath. Did you hear that? The day before the Sabbath. Luke 23:54. And that day was the preparation, and the Sabbath drew on. Remember what happened? Let's go to Luke. Let's go to Luke 23. Remember, because the Sabbath was coming, right? They had to take him down because the Sabbath was coming. Luke 23:54. Okay? They took him down and wrapped it, and that day was the preparation. So the day that Jesus was sacrificed, okay, from early in the morning until the afternoon, and then taken down, he had to be taken down before the Sabbath started. Which means the day that he was sacrificed, the day of his death and resurrection, or the day of his sacrifice and put in the grave, was the day of preparation. And what did I just show you? What did I just explain? For the Jews, this is the Sabbath day, okay, from evening to evening, Friday to Saturday all the time. They use this portion of the day, maybe all of it, but this portion right here, the day portion, is what they use for sure to prepare their meals and everything that they have to do so that it's their Sabbath day of rest. Which means this is the preparation day, okay, in relation to the Jews' Sabbath. What do we read about? The day portion from early in the morning until before sunset was that day of preparation, because the Sabbath was coming. So let's go back to what we know for a fact in Scripture. Jesus ate the Passover meal. We're told he was taken into the hands of sinful men. We're told early in the morning he was brought before them after a few before that, and he was before Pilate. He was crucified here and put in the grave, because this day, now sticking with with the calendar count, because this day right here was going to be the Sabbath. That means this, from early in the morning to the sunset, when he was crucified, they had to take him down, and they said this day was the day of preparation, because the Sabbath was now coming at sunset. You see the problem? Do you understand what the problem is, brothers and sisters? Jesus resurrected on the first day of the week, early in the morning after the Sabbath, just like we read. Early in the morning on the first day of the week after the Sabbath, when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Salome, early in the morning on the first day of the week. How on earth was this the Sabbath, and then yet him resurrect right here as the first day of the week? It ain't possible. You know, another thing that I just recently heard? I heard another Messianic rabbi say that Jesus resurrected on the 17th. But he never went into detail. Can you explain to me how this is the Sabbath that Jesus would resurrect on the first day of the week, being the 17th? How on earth is the midst of unleavened bread on the 17th day of the month, when it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th is the Sabbath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th is the Sabbath? How on earth is the 16th early in the morning the Sabbath? How on earth is the 17th early in the morning the Sabbath? Or after the Sabbath, I should say, as the first day of the week. It isn't. This is not the Sabbath, and this is not the first day of the week. This is not the Sabbath, and this is not the morning of the first day of the week. Impossible. Literally impossible. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Sabbath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Sabbath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Sabbath. Well then, okay, we can understand he literally did not die at when they were sacrificed. You ever hear those stories in church? I remember hearing even some other great pastors online years ago saying that while they were sacrificing the lamb in the temple, right for the temple sacrifice for Passover, Jesus was hanging on the cross. I don't know what gospel they were reading, because he wasn't. And if we're to believe that this was the early in the morning when he was sacrificed, and he was crucified right here, if we're to believe this, and you could say, oh, well, if you go from evening to evening because it's Passover and the first day of unleavened bread, then this is also the rest of Passover. Oh, really? What did God tell us? What did he tell them? What did he tell them? You are not to leave any of it until morning. Remember that? You're to have it that night. And anything that's left is to be burnt, because there shall nothing of it remain until morning. So how on earth was Jesus observing the Passover meal when they sacrifice the lamb, yet they're eating it before being taken into the hands of sinful men, and in the morning be the sacrificial lamb. In relation to the literal Passover lamb. I told you this was going to rock you. I don't know how many of you guys understood this before, but this had me squirreling. I was like, what is going on? What on earth is going on? Go pull all of this up. Go pull up a calendar. Pull up Passover week. Read the scriptures. This from here, from the beginning of sunset until the end of evening, is the Lord's Passover. Nothing can be left until morning. Yet we're told that then early in the morning of that very next day, Jesus was before Pilate. And that late morning, afternoon, at around noon, he was crucified and had to be taken down from the cross because what? Because the Sabbath was coming, and that means this was the day of preparation, right? Just like the scripture says, that this has to be the day of preparation in this understanding. And that means this was the Sabbath. Not possible. Because he resurrected on the day after the Sabbath, which means early in the morning after the Sabbath, it means he resurrected on the 17th. Which means this was the Sabbath. Bah. Sorry if I scared you. This isn't the Sabbath, guys. It isn't possible. You want to know what is possible? Remember what I was telling you guys? Remember I was explaining to you guys that the whole week is called Passover. The Feast of Unleavened Bread is the Passover. Did I make that up? Is it just me just spewing things? Or does it literally say, the Feast of Unleavened Bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover? Was Jesus killed at Passover? Yeah, of course he was. Was he killed at the time of the Lord's Passover? Absolutely, unequivocally, 100% no. He's eating the Passover. And John's Gospel does not have the Passover that messes people up, thinking that the Passover followed right away, when in fact, I just showed you was a different story from the sop to the two of them dipping in the Synoptic Gospels. So what does it mean? Well, you know what's interesting about the feasts? This is where suddenly some of us are going to be like, what? Now that makes so much more sense. And I'm going to prove it to you. Passover is in the evening of the 14th day. What comes with Passover? Unleavened bread. What comes after Passover? The Feast of First Fruits. We have had this conversation numerous times over the years to try and figure out where is the Feast of First Fruits and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. We have always bounced between here and here, okay? Or from here to here. Always bounced. In fact, I would have said here back then. So we always bounced thinking this was the first day of the week after the Sabbath at the time of his crucifixion. No! It didn't even dawn on me. And it didn't dawn on me because I didn't properly understand the feasts. But look at how much time we've been spending in the feast the past several months. This revelation because of the calendars. You see? So the question had always been, if this was the resurrection, then this, because I believe this was the Sabbath, and this was the Sabbath, and that's the Sabbath, and that's the Sabbath, that then if that's the Sabbath, this is the first day of the week. If that's the Sabbath, this is the first day of the week. So either this or this being the first day of the week at his resurrection was the Feast of First Fruits. But I always bounce back to where? I always bounce back to the 16th day. But we've bounced back and forth so often between the two. Why? Because it doesn't make sense. I have had this conversation so many times with my wife over the years in the bouncing back and forth. Ivan and I have had this conversation, and Ivan believes it's the week after where the Feast of First Fruits is. Have you ever asked yourself why or how the Feast of First Fruits is in the midst of the Feast of Unleavened Bread? Have you ever questioned that? How do you have the feast within a feast? That's the first red flag. You can't have a feast within a feast. And in fact, they're not even listed in it. Look at this. If the at evening of the 14th is the Lord's Passover, and it's also the first day of the 15th, because it's unleavened bread on the evening side, then guess what happens? If Feast of First Fruits is, if the Feast of First Fruits is supposed to be in unleavened bread, don't you think the Feast of First Fruits would have been mentioned in unleavened bread? Hello. Starting to make you question what's going on? Passover is mentioned with unleavened bread. Unleavened bread is actually called the Passover because the first evening of the 7 days that starts at evening is Passover. So if first fruits was supposed to be in the midst of unleavened bread, wouldn't it also have been mentioned? Yet we've been told Jesus is the Feast of First Fruits, and he fulfilled the Feast of First Fruits at his resurrection right here. Some would say right here, which means it would have been in the midst of unleavened bread. Yet we're told it's listed after unleavened bread. Which means what, brothers and sisters? If he wasn't that sacrificial lamb on literal Passover, which he wasn't, because he was eating it, and it had to be preparation day on the day of his crucifixion, because it was then followed by a Sabbath, this is not the time it happened. Oh, he ate the Passover meal. Satan did get indwelled. The devil indwelled Judas. But there were events that took place of being brought from one to the next, to the next, to the next, from one person to the next person. You want to know when the crucifixion took place? I want you to rewind and listen to what I just talked about in this. Because the events as we've been told them is impossible. I just showed it to you in the Gospels, and I showed it to you in the law. This is impossible for his crucifixion and resurrection. Was he taken after he had that meal at this evening at some point? Probably. But did he instantly go and the following morning get crucified? Not possible. Not possible. So then what happened? Well, let me show you a chart that I had our sister Tammy do for us, okay? We're going to go back to 2025, okay? We'll go back to April. I should go back, I think. Oh, there we go. We're going to go back to this year, April 2025, okay? Let's track this. So my thing, see, as I was going through this and putting this together, and Tammy put this, so the blue here, there's Passover in red. It's the evening of the 14th, and it's the beginning of unleavened bread. So unleavened bread starts at the time of Passover. There's the end of day 1, day 2, the end of day 3, the end of 4, the end of 5, the end of 6, the end of 7. Exactly as described in Scripture, to end at the evening of the 21st. And what did Scripture tell us? It began at the evening of the 14th. Ta-da! We know where unleavened bread is. And now we know why Passover is unleavened bread, and unleavened bread is all called Passover. It just begins with the Passover meal for unleavened bread Passover week. So what I was looking at was, where's the Sabbath? Is the Sabbath here, or is the Sabbath from here to here? Which, going forward, is it here, or is it from here to here? So let me get this out of the way. This is clearly not the Sabbath. Okay? This is clearly not the Sabbath. Let me get that out of the way. We now know where the Sabbath is. It's right here. From the evening of the 13th to the day of the 14th. Okay? From the evening of the 20th to the evening of the 21st. And now I'm going to prove it to you by blowing your socks off. All in Scripture. You see what we end up having? We have a day to day, which is like what? Like calendar years. Remember that? The day to day is like a spring to spring, from sunrise to sunrise. But the holy days, the feast days, the holy convocations go from evening to evening, just like the Sabbath, from evening to evening, which is like what? Which is like the sowing and the reaping. The sowing in the fall to fall, right? Sowing and reaping. When it starts to get darker, right? Starts to get darker, they start sowing, and then the reaping comes at the light, and then it gets dark again. You have the days that represent, this was another reason I started with this for you guys. We have the days like the years, and we have the feasts and the holy days of the Lord on the sowings and the reapings. Well, isn't that fitting? Because the sowings and the reapings of the day counts from evening to evening are the same as the sowing and reaping of the year counts from a Tishri to Tishri. It's a mind blower, guys. But get ready, because the craziness is coming. There's our Passover, evening of the 14th. Unleavened bread begins. He ate the Passover. In that evening, maybe it was that evening he was taken, right? I think so. He went out that evening after the meal. He went and prayed. He was deceived by Judas. And we're to believe that this was the early in the morning. But without rehashing it all over again, I'm rehashing with purpose so that it sinks in and you see what's being said and you could track it. So all this calendar is this calendar of April, okay? But just so I could write on it. So look what happens. There's the end of day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, end of day 7 on the 21st of Nisan at sunrise, at sunset. Okay? Just like we read in Exodus. The first day on the 14th day of the month at evening. You'll eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. Start eating it there. Stop eating it here. Well, I want to explain something to you. The first day portion is a holy convocation, and they're to do no servile work. And then on the 7th day, right here, on the day portion, it says the 7th day will be a holy convocation. See? It's so awesome. In the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. So right here, they're to do no servile work on this day. Are you ready for this? This day is what? This is the Sabbath, right? The Sabbath goes from here to here, right? Remember how the Sabbath went from here to here for Passover? This is where the Sabbath was. And then it was time for the Passover meal and the start of unleavened bread. There is no Sabbath at the start of Passover and unleavened bread. But on the very last day of unleavened bread, from the evening to evening, it's what? It's the Sabbath. It's clearly a Sabbath. And so if it's a Sabbath, and it's also a day of doing no servile work because it is a holy convocation, do you know what this Sabbath would be called? It would be called a high Sabbath, brothers and sisters. Hold on to your horses. Do we have scripture that tells us that after Christ was crucified, that not only was it a Sabbath, which we know, we saw it in Luke, we see it in Luke, in Mark, in John, and in Matthew. Mark was specific after the Sabbath, early in the morning on the first day of the week. Are you ready for this? Look what John tells us. Where is it? Watch this. John 19:31. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation, which means what? It was the preparation. It was the preparation. Let me show it again, just in our straight calendar. It was the preparation. So the Jews would tell you what? Well, this was their Sabbath, right? And it really was the Sabbath. Okay? This is also really the Sabbath, and it just so happened in April 2025 to be their Sabbath. It said that it was also preparation day. Well, if this is the Sabbath, and we know that this is their preparation day, see? There's the preparation day. There's the Sabbath. I'm going to repeat so you guys don't get confused. In 2025, in April, at Passover this year, it really did land Friday to Saturday, just by chance, okay? That means this was preparation day. Okay? This is the Sabbath. This is preparation day. It said Jesus was crucified, and it was preparation day. If Jesus was crucified here, and it was preparation day because the Sabbath drew on, and this is the true Sabbath that so happened to be the Sabbath in the month of April for the Jews on a Friday to Saturday, then that means Jesus must have been crucified here. You see how that's impossible, right? Because he was having the Passover meal. Well, what if we see that this is the Sabbath, right? This is the following week. This is, in April, this really was the Sabbath. Which means what? This was the preparation, was it not? This was the preparation. So Jesus would have had the Passover meal, maybe in that evening taken in the hands of sinful men, and in prison, and going from one to the other, until what? Until, here he is, all these times, he's being brought from one leader to the next, trying to deal with them, figure out what to do. And then what happens? He's brought early in the morning. Okay? Again, let's go to Mark's Gospel. We see it, I think it's in John and others as well. Straightway in the morning. Okay? Now, we also see in the morning in John's, excuse me, and elsewhere. So, if this was the in the morning that Jesus was brought to be crucified, brought before Pilate, and decide which one to give away, If this was it, and he was crucified here, this is called what? The day of preparation. Okay? We saw it everywhere. Every gospel at the same portion calls it the day of preparation. And it was the day of preparation for what? For the Sabbath that followed. But what is this Sabbath? This Sabbath is also the seventh day of unleavened bread from evening to evening. And at the evening right here, unleavened bread ends. And this portion of unleavened bread is a holy convocation of doing no servile work. So it is a holy convocation of doing no servile work, but it's also what? A Sabbath. It's also a Sabbath. We saw every gospel tell us that it was the preparation day, the day before the Sabbath. It was the preparation day, and the Sabbath drew on. It was the preparation of the Passover, about the 6th hour. The Jews, because it was the preparation day. Well, let's go read what the rest of John chapter 19 says. Hold on tight. We're ending with a bang. John 19:31. The Jews, therefore, because it was preparation, again, just to be clear, preparation happened on the day portion before the Sabbath started, and it was the day of Christ's crucifixion. The preparation, the day portion before the Sabbath. Please realize, I know you're probably yelling, we understand, Alan, but I want you to understand there is no way Jesus was crucified here at the preparation. There is no way this is the first day of the week, or this is the first day of the week, or this is the first day of the week, or that these are the Sabbath. It's impossible. So if it was Passover in unleavened bread, which is the feast of Passover, now unleavened bread drew nigh, which is called the Passover, then Jesus in Passover week would have been crucified in the day portion of the day of preparation, and then the Sabbath drew nigh, which is exactly what the Gospels tell us, that it was then time of the Sabbath. But you want to know the biggest clincher of the whole story? John gives greater detail to the story. The Jews therefore, in John 19:31, the Jews therefore, because it was the preparation day, that the bodies should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day. Now listen carefully. For that Sabbath day was an high day. Let me repeat that. It was preparation day. The final portion of the day when he was crucified. The light portion from morning to evening. And they had to take him down off the cross because the Sabbath day was coming. Preparation day, and they had to take him off the cross because the Sabbath was coming. But was it any old Sabbath? Nope. John is the one who adds the detail for us. For that Sabbath day was a high day. Do you know what makes it a high day, brothers and sisters? Is when it falls on another holy convocation. How is that for an explosion of your mind? What day is this, brothers and sisters? This is the seventh day of unleavened bread and the Holy Convocation, in the midst of a Sabbath, making it a Sabbath day after the day of preparation, the Sabbath day, and it is a high holy day because it lands within the Sabbath. It is a high Sabbath day. Brothers and sisters, at no point could it have ever happened in any of this right here. Do you understand that? Which means it would appear Christ was crucified on the 20th, put in the grave at sunset, at the end of preparation. It was Sabbath day and a high holy convocation Sabbath day that could not have happened at any of the other ones. And he was now in the grave from here through here, and he resurrected right here early in the morning. And what day would that be? There's your Sabbath day. And that first day of the week, early in the morning after the Sabbath. Not any Sabbath. The Sabbath would be enough. Do you understand that, guys? If it was just Sabbath, that would be enough to even disqualify it being anywhere over here. But it gave us even greater clues, even greater detail in John chapter 19 to tell us that it wasn't only a Sabbath, but that it was a high holy one. And they only happen on holy convocation days. Well, guess what, brothers and sisters? If this is the first day of the week, what day would this be? Early in the morning, in the first day of the week. Do you know what day this would be? Dun, da, da, da. You guessed it. You guessed it. Come on. You guessed it. The Feast of First Fruits. Boom! Over and done. Go ahead, brothers and sisters. I pray you guys will go into this, look into it, dig into it, and reveal it to yourselves, to your spirit. Pray over it, look into it, seek it, and search it out, brothers and sisters. Because I am convinced we have the revelation of the understanding of the Gospels of the Passover and Passover week. We can understand why Christ was eating the Passover meal. We can understand John chapter 13, and it was before Passover, and that when he was taken into the hands of sinful men, there were events taking place that wasn't just the following day, the next morning, because it was a preparation day before the Sabbath, and that Sabbath was a high holy Sabbath, brothers and sisters. Luke, John, Mark, Matthew, in the revelation of the Gospels, all four of them together, proving out the understanding in the revelation of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, and the true timing of the Feast of First Fruits, brothers and sisters. Pray over it, seek it, search it, be diligent, and understand it for yourselves. Holy Spirit, lead them in it, open their eyes, their understanding, and their hearts to receive it as you have helped me to receive it and understand it. It is a mind blower. Brothers and sisters, I pray it blesses you as it has incredibly blessed me. God is good. His Spirit is unequivocally working in us and through us all. The books are opening. Understanding is on fire. The Spirit is on fire, guys. And I believe it's because He's preparing us as we are getting closer and closer and closer. I believe we are in the 70th year, and that the revelation is true. We know it's true. We've proven it for 7.5 years. Now we've got another one to add into the mix. Absolutely mind-blowing. Craziness. I don't know if it's ever been done before. I've never seen it. And that's not tooting my horn. I know nothing except the Father wills it in the Son by the Spirit leading. And that means the same for you when you see these things and you understand these things throughout all the different teachings. Brothers and sisters, I love you. God bless you. God bless your families. We'll talk to you soon. Bye for now.